Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I want to welcome us to today's session, our meetup for the Nigeria M365 community. So in today's session, we'll be looking at another workload. For the past 6 weeks, we look at the Exchange Online. So we're moving to another workload in the Microsoft 365, which is SharePoint and OneDrive. And today we have the pleasure to have an important guest joining us today to actually take us through the SharePoint OneDrive itself. So welcome again to today's session. So my name is Emmanuel Itoje. I'm IT professional with experience in cloud services infrastructure, and I have over 8 years experience in the IT space. And we have the pleasure of having today with us our speaker, Stanley. So Stanley is actually the head of desktop support with our Live Score group. He's a SharePoint and OneDrive for business expert. He has over 7 years experience within the IT space, and he's a lifelong learner. He has proven skills around cloud security and compliance while using cloud storage technology like the OneDrive for business. He's an expert with SharePoint Online, and he likes using a Power Automate to automate business process. So thank you for joining us today, Stanley. It's a pleasure to have you on board. You can have the
Yeah,
floor,
thank you.
please.
Thank you. Same here. Thanks, Itoje, for the intro. And welcome once again, guys, for today's session on SharePoint and OneDrive. Although we'll just be doing an intro on SharePoint Online. So, Itoje, I just want to confirm, what's the range of participants? Is it beginners or it's mixed up?
It's
So I
actually mixed
can
up. It's
mixed up.
actually mixed
Oh,
up,
okay.
but the idea is we are bringing it from the foundation. So
Foundation.
our
Okay.
our goal our goal is to bring everybody. We are assuming everybody is a beginner to at least over intermediate level.
Okay. Okay, cool stuff. Cool stuff. So, while we go along with the session, I might drop a link to the Microsoft Developer Program so that persons would have access to, a developer sandbox where they could practice all this stuff that we do. So, my the session would basically be an intro, then would go into demo, right? So that we would see how these things work in practice, right? So just a brief intro and a demo. So I'll be sharing my screen just to share some slides, basically. Uh, One sec. Ba, 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 ba. Can't see the screen again. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can say it.
Oh, one sec. Okay. Um. So yeah. My name is Stanley. Uh, I'm an IT specialist around cloud tech. Just like Itoje mentioned, I've been long in IT, like over 7 years now. We've been doing from uh, in-office support down to remote support. Trying to support these technologies. But I found love in SharePoint Online, right? Because it gives me that. So I have a background in web development. After school, started web development, trying to make ends meet. The Nigerian dream, right? So that was my starting point: PHP, HTML, CSS, and all. So when I saw SharePoint, I said, "Hey, this seems to be where I need to pitch my tent," right? So without much ado, so this is me on LinkedIn. If you search for Stanley Ezendiokwere, I think I'm the only Stanley Ezendiokwere on LinkedIn. So you should find me with my afro, although I've lost the afro now. Yeah. So moving forward, right? SharePoint, right? What is SharePoint not? SharePoint is not an internet. Like most persons come and say, "Hey, I want to host SharePoint on my website," and I'm like, "Hey, that's not the way SharePoint was built for. It's a separate platform on its own, right?" And so SharePoint is part of the M365 suite, just like Exchange Online, Microsoft Teams. It gives organizations that have venue to have uh, a point where they can share stuff. So that's why it's SharePoint, right? Have a point where you can share ideas, where you can share files, where you can share blog posts, where you can share events, where you can share your calendar, where you can share whatever that has to do with your business process, right? So SharePoint gives that confluence for all these collaborations to go on within an organization, right? And so SharePoint usually go along with OneDrive. So you hear people say SharePoint or OneDrive for business, right? Because OneDrive for business sits on SharePoint. So SharePoint provides that architecture for OneDrive to operate within an organization. Because some persons would want to say they want to opt into would come into licensing and products for you to have access to SharePoint, right? Some persons will just want they'll buy the OneDrive for business plan, right? But that usually is not possible without the SharePoint backing it, right? So what SharePoint is
Hi, Stanley. Please, can you go to slide mode? Let it be full, the slide mode.
Oh, okay. So when I go to slide mode, it actually fills up my screen, and I don't like it.
Okay.
So, but no worries, I'll go. I'm on slide mode now.
All right.
Okay.
You can right click and select presenter view. So if you still want to make use of notes, you can see your notes to use. Can
Oh,
right
okay.
click on it and say presenter view, show presenter
Presenter
view.
view. Okay. Presenter view. Okay. You can still see it, right?
Yes, we can say it.
Okay. 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 So, like I mentioned earlier, SharePoint is an intranet service. So it's hosted within an organization. So only members within an organization can have access to the SharePoint resource. You can also share it with guests, and those guests would also have access to this. That's going into permissions, right? So with SharePoint, you can access SharePoint on your PC, on a Mac, on mobile devices, right? Either through the mobile device web or the SharePoint application itself, right? SharePoint comes with contents like the lists, libraries, and web pages, right? So the web page gives it the user experience and user interface where your users could interact with the features within SharePoint. Libraries are basically a point where you save files within any type of files actually, except wouldn't we so best practice .exe files or executable files are not advised to be stored on SharePoint, and files like the PST files due to versioning. We'll come to that because each file stored on SharePoint creates versions as you interact with them, and each of these versions eat up spaces, right? So yeah, moving on. We'll basically move into the demo section shortly, right? The whole SharePoint architecture is built on communication, right? And there are the two basic templates for SharePoint sites, the team sites and communication sites. Although we have other types of sites like having a document center, having a I'll show you. I usually don't memorize them because the two basic ones we have, we interact with are the team sites and communication sites. So the communication site is basically for sharing communications, right? So for organizations, when you join some organizations, you are first directed to their policy page. You get to see the HR page, what HR has in store for you as a staff. You get to see the department, who is the head of this department, who is the member of this team, and so on and so forth, right? It's best suited for a communication site. However, you can choose to use any of these templates as you like, right? Because the basic structure of the site, the basic structure in terms of does it have a library? Yes. Does it have web pages? Yes. Does it have lists? Can you create lists in them? Yes. Right. So, but the difference is in the user interface, the user experience, and some features you can find on a team site, you won't be able to see it on a communication site in the settings. Like when you go deep into advanced SharePoint development, right? So they differ in their meta features, right? But the basics from the ground up, they look the same, right? So it's now led for you based on practice to know when to use a team site or when to use a communication site, right? Let me see. Do I have to have something else? Okay. So would go into a demo where I can just show you how we can create site, how we can manage users, and all stuff. One sec. Let me stop sharing that and share something else. So let me share the screen two. Okay. Okay. Let me know if you can still see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool stuff. Okay, so before you can be able to create a site or manage a site, right? You need to have access to the M365 Admin Center as an administrator, right? As a user, you need to have access to the SharePoint defaults page as a user. And before you can have access to SharePoint as a user within an organization, you need to have a license that has the SharePoint Online Plan 1 and above, right, for you to have access to that feature. And for you to manage SharePoint sites as an administrator, you need at least the SharePoint administrator role, right? So this gives you the access to like go in and manage SharePoint sites, right? And there are three ways we can create. Okay, so let me mention three ways we can create SharePoint sites. There are quite a lot, right? So we can either create SharePoint site from the admin center, which we'll see shortly, or from the SharePoint landing page, which we'll also see shortly, or you can create SharePoint sites from within Microsoft Teams. We'll see how that comes into play as we go along. So I have access to a sandbox that we can use. I would navigate to the SharePoint Admin Center. From here, we can basically control most features with that SharePoint has to play with. Like from here, we can see policies in terms of sharing. Do you want least permissive or most permissive? You can control sharing. How do you want to share SharePoint, right? And so just like I said earlier, OneDrive is built on SharePoint, right? I can't increase this permissions for OneDrive if I don't enable it for SharePoint, right? I can make SharePoint anyone can view and reduce OneDrive to just only people in my organization, but sorry, okay, I think someone came in on mute. Okay. So yeah, so this way you can control access control. These are all security features too. So but let's focus on creation of sites and how to manage sites, right? So this is one place to create a site. This is the SharePoint Admin Center. The other place to create a site is by just going to the SharePoint platform here. This takes you to the landing page for your SharePoint. So you see your frequent sites you frequent a lot, and you can access those sites from here, or you can create a site from this particular section, right? But we wouldn't be using that just yet. Do you want to save? Yeah, sure, this panel, yes, right? And you can be able to create a post here, just like we would see in communication sites, right? Okay, so let's create a site. So the initial dialogue for creating a site is basically choose between a team site and a communication site, just like I said earlier. So these are the two basic types of sites we can create within SharePoint, right? There are other types of sites we can also create, right? When you click on these other options, it gives you a whole lot of templates. So you can create a document center. So the organization I work with, we have a document center. So we use that basically for archive purpose, right? So we have data for long-term use, right? I think the basic within our organization, we use basically document centers for that connect the whole organization. Then within these document centers, we now have libraries for each department. so it can work anyway. So we have enterprise wiki, we have publishing portal, contact center, and see more templates here, right? So, but we're not doing that today, right? So let's first off create a communication site, right? The basic detail is actually what's the site name, who will be an owner, and what language should this site have. We have other advanced option where you can apply sensitivity, right? Where you can select the time zone you want that site to be on, you know. So this site is demo one application site, right? So this automatically creates a URL. Okay, let me backtrack, right? When you create a Microsoft 365 account, it creates a company name for you, right? It creates a domain section. This part of it that says 41T9VN. So usually for organizations that actually get a paid plan, you could have, say, maybe LiveScore, right? .onmicrosoft.com, LiveScore.sharepoint.com, right? So you'd have that name there, and you can recently, yes, you have the option to change that particular name, right? So it takes that name, the name of your organization, .sharepoint.com. So everything you do is hosted on SharePoint.com. Just like most persons that are familiar with content management systems like WordPress, Blogger, all those stuff. So it's hosted on WordPress.com for WordPress, blogpost.com for blog post, right? So they handle the DNS section of whatever you're trying to do, right? So just give it a site name. It removes spaces for you, and you can also edit this to suit the URL you want, right? It should have a site owner myself. Language should be English, sensitivity, all this, not interested. Okay, give it a description just so that, okay, so over the years, I've found out that descriptions such as this, and possibly for groups you create within Microsoft 365 workload, it's usually best to give it a description, right? Because you won't always be there in that organization. So it helps to describe whatever you're trying to do so that someone else, a different admin can, make reference to those description and, continue from where you stop. Basically. So once you're done setting up this, you just click on create site. It works for some time and site's created, right? Okay, so all you just need to do is to come down here, look for the site, and click on it to open up, right? So at a first glance, so this comes with custom templates, right? You see how it's arranged and all, right? And of late, SharePoint, or rather, Microsoft has been very lenient in giving us templates to use. Let's say because you can browse this, you can do this later, by the way, or you can browse these templates and select a template that suits, the project you want to do. You are trying to like achieve using that communication. So is it human resources? Do you want to create a learning center, right? Is it something that has to do with events? So employee onboarding, stuff like that, right? You can just select a template and it would put in custom data for you, create document libraries and all. Although I don't think this is what we want to do. So let me allow it to finish applying, right? So this is a communication site, right? While this is applying a template, let me just create a team site so we see at a glance, right? So that at a glance we can see the difference between a communication site and a team site, right? So let's go with a team site and call this ng m365 demo 2 team site. So right, from the look of things while creating a team site, you see the requirements looked a bit different, right? So communication sites are not connected to a Microsoft 365 group, right? It doesn't come with a group. it just has a site owner, right? So, and ideally, communication site, if you don't restrict users access to it, every user within the organization would have access to a communication site, right? However, for a team site, it's connected to a Microsoft 365 group, which we would see later how it enables you to be able to create a Microsoft team out of a team site, right? So this asks for a group owner. Who will be the group owner? Myself still, right? The same language and sensitivity. And now it has this option of privacy level, right? Do I want the privacy to be public? Anyone in the organization can access the site, right? Just like you find with a communication site. Or do I want it to be private? Only members that I add to the site would have access to it, right? So just a vivid example of when to use a team site, right? In creating SharePoint sites. Let's say you have a project to deploy, you know, you guys have a project to reach 100,000, clients before the end of the year, and you guys want to have a space where members of that project could communicate, could interact, could share files and documents and all stuff, right? That's where you go for a team site, right? And you set the privacy to private, so that only members that you add to that particular space would have access to interact, right? So here I would set it on private and click on next. So, and it requires you to add members straight up, right? While you are at it, I think I have, can't remember name of, Miriam Graham, and so just add users that these are part of the project I'm currently running, and say save, right? So this also works on the behind the scene and create. So here it's created already, right? So if you look at the screen, you would see these two sites that we just created, right? From here, primary admin says self. The primary admin for these guys is group owners, right? You can see the templates it's using communication site. So from here, you can see the templates for whatever site that was created. And yeah, so we click on this. Immediately you look at this, you see the interface is quite different from the communication site we worked on earlier, right? And you also have that, maybe later. You also have that option of adding a template, how you want the overlay to look like, right? So it's good to have it side by side, right? So that I can show you how the major difference and how to work within, right? So this is the templates that we added to that site, right? And it's looking pretty, right? And the navigations for communication sites are quite different. If you look closely, you don't get to see the option of, just like we have on the team site, where you see conversations, documents, all the site contents on the side, right? Communication site are communication. They want you to see a news item, interact with this article, stuff like that. This is what communication sites are meant for, branding. I want to showcase. It's for showcase, unlike the Microsoft Teams site, right? So from here, we can add news posts from here, right? You can add a list, you can add a document library, you can add pages to this particular, let's add a page. Select a page, I'm new at this, Okay. You can create a page, give it a name. Give it a name, edit the content, add sections, depending on how you want to draft it. You can just check this out much later, right? Once you're done, you publish, right? So if you don't publish, the changes you made doesn't show up. You can also add this page to the navigation, right? Or you can, so this is the link to the page basically. So how you want to work with it, you can do so. So from here, you can see this page we just created. Down here, go to home, right? So if we remember earlier, right, the idea of a communication site is, like I said, news communication, like you want to share newsletters, like someone can come from here, right, and click on, hold on, let me refresh this so that it picks this new site that we just created, right? Someone can from here, say, create a new post, right? You can look for a site, it's not showing up here. Okay, yeah. You can create a new post, you know, give it a title, give it a title, add an image, you know, put in some content, text. You know, put in some content and post news, right? Posting so that when you come down here on this particular site and refresh, there's a section for posts. One sec. I just want to confirm, create a post. So let me add a widget for posts. Okay, let's republish. So earlier there wasn't a section for news articles, right? So, but now we can see the news articles that we have created earlier, right? So they'll show down here. Just like we saw what I did earlier, you can edit this page. You can edit the page. You can remove content, put in the contents you want, right? For communication sites, right? Then let's. So it also has site content, right? And you can access that from the settings icon at the top. When you click on site content, it shows up this same way as you would when I click on site content here, right? So this is the site content section for a team site. This is the site content for a communication site. That's still basically the same thing, right? So here, down here, this is, so now let's work on a team site because we wouldn't dwell more on communication sites. So team sites are basically built for collaborations, right? Where you have your documents. These are files. You can create folders here. Create folders here. You can create single files, Excel, or depending on what type of file you want to create. Right. Okay, so stuff like this, create this Excel file, you know, can create this and save. It shows up here. Refresh so that it shows the name that was saved with. So you can create folders. You can also upload items right from your machine, right? You can upload files as much as you want. So SharePoint gives you a storage space of 25 terabytes, right? You have access to store as much as 25 terabytes. Although, to be honest, I don't yet understand how Microsoft does its storage stuff. I'm still unraveling the concept on storage because you'd see because from down here we see we have access to just 1.2 terabytes of organization storage. I'm still trying to understand this particular part of SharePoint. I'm still understanding it, right? So you have access to save 25 terabytes of data. You can also manage storage space. So if you notice earlier, when we created this site, we didn't allocate a space for it because the storage space, the storage configuration I have for my organization is that as much files as I want to store on it. So, but there's a situation where you can just want to limit this particular team site to say maybe 100 gigabytes or 50 gigabytes. You don't want the site to grow above that, right? You can specify that in this section. Where is that? Yeah. Okay, storage, site storage limit is automatic. So it's set on automatically. I can make it manual, right? When it's manual, each time I create a site, it asks me how much space do I want to give this site, right? And but it's best to leave it on automatic for me. So this is a sandbox, basically, right? So this is a document library, right? And so on the site contents, we can see this default library called documents, right? In a situation where you would want to have a document that is named something that's relating to what you want to use it for, right? Let's say we want to add, so you can add, so there are stuff you can add to this site, lists, pages, document libraries, and apps, maybe custom apps or inbuilt Microsoft apps, right? So from here, you can add a document library, give it a name, budget documents, sensitivity. This library contains explicitly budget-related files and communications, right? Do in site navigation, do you want to show it on the site navigation or you don't want to show it? So I would create this to show on site navigation, then I'll create another one that doesn't show on the site navigation. So on site navigation, you see it here, it says budget documents, right? So these have the, what's it called? The name budget documents and how that reflects. Now, let's say, let's create some test files here. I just want to show you how relevant it is. You name these particular libraries. Demo file. Right. So now, okay. So this is you accessing these libraries on the web, right? We're accessing these libraries on the web. However, for document libraries that we create, we can sync these libraries down to our machine so we can have a local copy of it. So just like most organizations do before now, we have file shares. There are file shares within the organization that are network connected, where for each machine that is joined to a domain, the file share, the network location gets added so that you can access those files. So the same thing can be done with SharePoint Online or OneDrive. You can sync it to your machine by the aid of the OneDrive sync client, right? So when I sync this document, this library on my machine, it will have this document, budget documents as a last name, right? So that anyone that is interacting with that file would know that, hey, I'm making changes in the budget document library, right? When you hit on sync, basically to sync, either you do this, close this, or you add a shortcut to OneDrive. Personally, I don't advise this reasons because for users that are not tech savvy, they tend to get confused on which is which because adding the shortcut to my OneDrive, let's do that. Add shortcut to OneDrive, right? So this is adding a shortcut to my OneDrive. Let's open my OneDrive, my files, right? I see budget documents here in my OneDrive location, right? It shows the option of a shortcut and it shows the sharing is from this particular group, right? So that when I think I'm syncing this, let me just show something. I'm syncing this, I'm not sure. This PC. Okay, yes, I'm syncing this, right? So that's down here, I can see the budget document show up here. I can open it up and interact with that file there. Right now, this is showing in my OneDrive. So an issue comes where people start, putting in personal documents into that particular directory, which isn't what we want the idea of SharePoint, right? SharePoint should be project related, company business related, and should be separate from your OneDrive, right? So all I just need to do is come here and how do I remove? Right, I remove that from my one. So the basic, the best practice is just sync it, right? Open link, just sync it to your OneDrive. It gives this dialog. Okay, I think I've closed it. Didn't stay long, right? So that you can come down here, right, and see this directory that you just synced, right? Shows budgets, the name of the site. So this is where naming a site is very important. Chinedu, I see you raised your hand.
Hi, Stanley.
Yeah, what's up? How you
Good.
doing?
I am okay. Thank you. Nice presentation. I just wanted to add up regarding, the limitations with creating a shortcut
Oh,
over
okay,
there, if you could
okay.
let me.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I think one of the disadvantages with adding a shortcut over there is for libraries that have exceeded the least threshold, right? So Stanley
Okay.
advised, if you're not really tech savvy, you shouldn't add the shortcut because most times your library, which you just created, for example, might have exceeded the 5,000 limit threshold, right? So whenever you add that particular library or an item in there as a shortcut into OneDrive, of course, that would stop or limit OneDrive from effectively syncing because of due to the limitations
Oh,
that
okay.
that the particular SharePoint library has. So I just said to add that.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, like I said, I've always stayed away from shortcuts. I don't know. I've stayed away from it because I don't. I just don't. It doesn't look. It doesn't sound technical to me. Maybe someone is just trying to fulfill why they are in Microsoft, adding that shortcut there. It's. I can just sync it. Come on, it's easy that way. Just sync it or access on the web. Because it creates a whole lot of issue, right? So in support line, you see someone come in and saying, I can't find this directory. Okay, Emmanuel.
Yes, Stanley. Tamila would like to provide like an update on the SharePoint storage to bring in more light to SharePoint storage. Tamila,
Okay.
can you have the floor, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hi everyone. I was hoping we'll do this at the end anyway, not to break the flow, but it's fine. Eniola already dropped what is the right information anyway. So basically, the SharePoint storage works based on your license. So where you're seeing the 1.2 TB on the tenants that we are using for the sandbox at the moment, it shows that, so depending on the license you have, so let's take the E5 developer, which I believe is what we have on this tenant at the moment.
Yes.
It gives you by default 1 TB. So the 1 TB is like the tenant's default, right? And based on the number of seat counts you buy, so for this tenant, I believe it's 25 seat count.
25
So
seats. Yeah.
yeah, so that's 10 gig times 25. So that's around like a two terabyte.
Yeah.
Or no, like
250 gigabyte, I
250
think.
gig, 250 gig,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's like a 1.2 terabyte. So that's why you have 1.2 there. Yes, according to all the docs, SharePoint has a storage limit of 25 TB. So what that means is your SharePoint cannot store more than 25 TB, right? But
Okay.
it depends on your organization storage. So at the moment, your organization storage is 1.2 TB. You cannot exceed 1.2 TB on all of your SharePoint sites, no matter what you store. Where the
Yeah.
25 terabytes actually works is in organizations that has more storage. So let's say for instance you have 1 petabyte on your tenant storage. So if you have
Okay.
1 petabyte on your tenant storage, so it means each of your SharePoint sites cannot take more than 25 TB. The moment you
25
reach that
terabyte.
limit,
Yeah.
you just need to go to another site. You can't store anything else on that site. So yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, that's the breakdown.
Yeah, very tricky. So from your explanation, let's say an organization has 1,000 users. Can a tenant
Yeah,
have up to 1,000 users?
sure.
Right. So that's 1,000 times 10 gigabytes
Times
for
10
each of
gig.
those
Yeah,
users, right?
yeah, correct.
So that means such organization do not need to get extra file storage, right?
Depending on what they are storing, they might if they are using heavy data, yeah, they might need it. But basically when you want to increase the storage, for instance, you want to increase your 1.2 TB, you have two
Mm,
options: get more seat counts if you want to, if it's needed, or you get
yeah,
extra file storage.
extra file storage. Okay. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that information. I've been
All
battling
right.
with this particular explanation for years now. Each
Yeah.
time I get a ticket, customer wants to know why you said 25 terabytes, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm exceeding
But
my storage. What's
next
happening,
to
you
them,
know?
yeah, it's very tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate. Right. So let's get back, right? So you have document libraries, right? You can create as much libraries as you want. So you can check online. There are limits for how many libraries a SharePoint site can contain, right? So just check that up much later. So you can create as much library as you want for each individual project or whatever need you want to meet, right? Yeah, so that is that. I've shown you how to sync. And so let's go back to site content and see some other stuffs we can create. So one good thing I like about Microsoft is they innovate, they develop, right? So the list settings, the list interface currently has greatly improved, I must say, right? It makes SharePoint lists interactive and all, right? So I can create a list from here, a SharePoint list, right? And it also gives you a starting point. You can have a template of a list you want to create, right? It's much easier for you to start and make edits as you go on, right? So you can see the templates you can have. You can start. You can create a blank list. You can start from existing list. Let's say I have a different list on this particular SharePoint site. I can create more like a duplicate of that list, and make a few changes. I can also create a list from an Excel file. So let's say someone sent me an Excel document of Nigeria's budgets, right? And it has, all those columns and rows. So I can just create a SharePoint list from that particular file, and upload that data so I can, interact with it the way I want to. So let's create a blank list, right? So each list has a name. This should be attendance tracker. Will track attendance for offshore engineers, right? Show inside navigation or no. Okay, maybe we don't want to show this or want to show it. So if you click on not show it, it doesn't show up on this particular end. So, but let's still show it, right? So this creates a blank SharePoint list for you, right? With just the column title, right? And now you go on to like add columns. This should be a choice column. What's the name of this column? Uh, in attendance. Maybe what choice should it be? Yes, no, or on leave, right? Default value, none, right? More options, drop down, on selection. No. Let's save this, right? Shows in attendance, uh, so when you're creating a column, we have there are types of columns, right? You have text, choice, date and time, multiple lines of text, person number, yes or no, calculated column, inherited, a column that look up from another one, right? So let's say this we want to make it to be a person, right? Who is this person that is signing in? Name staff, description, this contains the name of the person entering their attendance. Uh, person or group, allow selection of groups. No, just person. Show profile picture, yes. Okay, save. Right, and date and time, next. Date and time, include time, yes. Friendly format, yes. Information. And two people signing at the same time, yes. So leave it that way. So so for columns, you can also make some columns have like require that an entry is entered, right? This is good when you're working on SharePoint alone, but it poses some challenges when we're trying to connect to Power Apps, right? Because if we connect to Power Apps and we don't catch that particular, let's say you have a list that you want to enter data into, right? And you've forgotten that one of those lists, one of those columns must have a data, and you make a mistake of omitting it in a SharePoint in a Power Apps application, you will just be hitting error when you want to enter values, right? You'll be hitting errors and as you go along, but that's a different story, right? So let me just walk off of this. So if you want to add a new item on this title, one sec, come on, this column. One sec, list settings. I don't want this to show up. Okay. Attendance tracker, right? So let's add a new record, right? Yes. Okay. Yes. Name of staff, Megan. You can fill it out for people, or they can fill it out. Today's date. So usually, if you are developing, a functional application, so you won't show this to users. So when a record is entered, it populates on its own, right? Select this and save. You see the overlay. This is a record that just got added. So you can add as much columns as you would want to. Right now, this is a SharePoint list, right? So let's also see how you can create a list from the templates that are provided, right? And select a new list. Select from either of these, say employee onboarding. These are the columns that you would have, right? Use the template, employee onboarding. What's this about? It creates this. So this comes with default. No, it doesn't. Right. So this comes with pre-created columns, right? Work. IT support, description, IT support. You can enter values first day completed. Yes. The date and time. This mentor. Relevant link, attachment, alternate text, save. Right, you can add list items, right? So this is it for the document libraries, the list items, right? So now we manage permissions. To manage permissions on this library to create to restrict access to them, right? Is to access everything from the settings section. So depending on what section you are on, this settings icon, the content of the settings icon changes. If I'm in a document library and I click on settings icon, I see library settings, right? If I'm in a list and I click on settings, I see list settings, right? Yeah, goes that way. right? So let's say for this budget document, budget library, you want to restrict access to it, right? The library settings, you can control basic settings on the library from here. Let's go back. The basic settings library, just maybe the name, the description, and or stuffs, right? Or you go to the advanced more library settings where you get a not too friendly page to manage stuffs like versioning, vision for this document, list name, description, navigation, workflow, and you can create columns here. You can create views here too for these document libraries, depending on what you want to do, right? So to manage the permissions, this is where you go to. Click on permissions for this document library. So every document library has default groups that are created, default SharePoint groups that are created. The name of the site, members, the name of the site, owners, the name of the site, visitors, right? These are more like it's default for each site. However, right, you can want to manage security groups that can have access to this site. So depending on how the organization is structured, so within LiveScore, the way we made it is that we have security groups that are synced from the AD to Office 365, where if you're a member of this security group, you would have access to it. So for every of our sites, we stopped inheritance. Stopped inheritance for each and every one of our sites, and we deleted these default groups, right? We deleted these default groups and added unique SharePoint groups for each of these those libraries, right? And we do not share externally on some libraries. We block the option of sharing externally, right? So from here you can grant maybe permission to a security group. I think I created a group, SEC. Okay, no, I don't have that. So you can add people individually, right? Select the option. What access should the person have? Edit, right? You want to share everything in this folder, even items with need permission. You select that, yes or no. I don't want to send any invitation to this person, right? You share, and when you refresh, you see that user show up here, right? At any point in time, you said, hey, well, I don't want to be using default groups. You can always delete the unique permissions, and those default groups that were created earlier comes back again, right? So that's one way to manage who has access, to each and every site. So to add a user to a member, right? So this is anybody that is a member of this particular site that this document library is located in has edit permission. Right. So that means for you to add someone here, if one sec. Okay, I go to members and I want to add someone. So I just click on add member, type the person's name, Chidebere, select the person, go now, depending on this permission I want to give this person, add him up. The person shows up here. Automatically this person gets added to that member SharePoint group that we saw earlier, and they would have access to make changes, to create files, add posts and all, right? So the one basic difference, okay, another difference between a communication site and a team site is the option to create a Microsoft Teams collaboration, right? By default, on every team site, you see this option down here, add real-time chats, right? And you see the option to add a Microsoft Teams. And that is made possible because of because team sites are tied to M365 groups. And M365 groups is the I call it the foundation for teams, collaboration. Microsoft 365 groups, it has calendar, you have it calendar, you have you can add contacts to it, stuff like that. It's more like a shared mailbox on steroids, right? So from here, once you just click on this, this creates So it says bring resources from this site into a team, where you guys can collaborate, make it easier for chat, that can add resources that stops in pages, budget this, employee onboarding. Yeah, add team. That we can also see another process where we can manage the contents of this particular, so that when I go to my Teams, when I access my Microsoft Teams from here, and I go to Teams, one sec. Okay, and I go to Teams, I should be able to see this particular team here, right? I go to general, I can see files, these files are for something went wrong. What went wrong? Employee onboarding. That's the list we created earlier. I think it's still trying to load up, or it's my network, either ways. Right, so we can see this particular section, and when we add a channel, Firefox can open this page. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Firefox. Okay, good riddance. I don't know if it's a Firefox issue for this not to open. Do you have any Teams expert here? Why it's erroring out for this?
So I think this should be maybe delay in the syncing from the SharePoint, right?
SharePoint, okay.
Yeah, maybe after a while we could check again.
Okay. I think, yeah, you're correct. It says fetch failure. So it's an error of fetching from SharePoint. Yeah, so that's it basically, right? You can manage, stuff from here. You can create a new channel, right? It's called this channel Logheads channels list. Okay, and create a new channel. Logheads has its own files. Yeah, that's propagation issue that was mentioned. Right. So that's it. Document. Okay. So if you notice, we created that channel and created a folder here. Right. It's also created a folder for general. Right. So the files shared in this, are stored here. So by default, we see that the Teams interaction for a SharePoint, the Teams interaction for a SharePoint site, they make use of this default library called documents, right? Any stuff you do with the connected Teams gets stored here, right? For you to make reference to, right? So we've seen how to create a site. We've seen how to add users to the site, right? We've also seen how to create new libraries, add list items to them. Yes, let's also look at how to change the name of a site. Site information. Let's say at some point, I don't like this name again. Let's say this. And change the site. Confluence. And hit save. Let's refresh. So the name of the site changes. So if you so when you change the name of a site, it should be automatic. I don't know why it's not automatic, right? The synced location, right, should change, but it doesn't. You need to unsync, and resync, right, for it to say Confluence integer dash document, budget document, right? I don't know why it doesn't do that automatically. Yeah, but that is Microsoft and Windows, right? So you can change the name of the site at any point in time. So, but best practice, right? Best practice, I keep saying, right? Before you embark on a SharePoint project, right? Before you embark on creating sites, it's usually best to plan, have a plan, what should be the name of the site, what URL should it have, let all these things be planned so that you don't go in and start making changes. And because most changes you make in a SharePoint site would have a downside along the line. Let's say we come here and change the name of this document library now, the default one, to something else, right? At some point when we want to automate some stuff, we can get confused, right? Because the name wouldn't change in the back end, right? It might not change in the back end, right? So stuff like that. So it's usually best to plan, how should this look like? What should the user interface be? How many lists should I have? What will be the columns on this list, so that it helps the production stage, so that once you are done creating it, you can push it out for a wider use, so you don't get to make changes along the line and makes everything rowdy. So just like I mentioned earlier, for those that are new to the M365 experience, right, make use of this link I will be dropping, right? You can use the developer link to create a test tenant for yourself that wouldn't get expired, so long as you keep making development changes, you keep creating stuff, you keep doing good stuff, right? It's always active, right? Any questions at all? Any questions at all, or any stuff you want to share? Add to what has been shared today. Daniel, yeah, your hand is up.
Yeah, hello, Stanley.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So quick question. So
Sure.
as I noticed on the team site, you created an attendance tracker, and those I'm thinking that is for the members of that team, right?
Yeah, the members of the team, yes.
So if I was a member, if somebody is a member of that team, how do they access that attendance tracker? Is there like a URL?
It's by default, it's at the top, right? I didn't add it, right, when I created the team, right? I didn't add it, right, when the teams were created, right? Because if you notice, when I was creating it, it said, hey, do I want to move this over and all? And I didn't select that. But hey, if I want to add it up, right? Let me see how to add that. One sec. The attendance tracker, right?
Yes, please.
One sec. Okay, I think I'm having a limitation with Firefox. One sec. Let me sign into Microsoft Chrome. That's one downside with developer tenants. You'd have to. I've not been able to memorize this name. Okay, good. Let me sign in. One sec. Okay.
So while you're signing in, Stanley, there was a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Someone was asking that what is the path to become a solution architect? I think the person means maybe a SharePoint architect.
Okay, yeah. A SharePoint architect. So there was once a time I applied for a cloud solution architect at one company, and I went digging, who is an architect and all that. So it's basically someone that can create stuff around a particular subject, right? So for you to be a SharePoint architect, right, solution architect, you need to know how to create custom applications, right? You need to know how to, do automations. You need to know how to run automations on SharePoint. You need to know how to use Microsoft Graph on SharePoint. stuff like that. You need to just know how to do dev work, right? On SharePoint. Although most organizations that advertise for the role of SharePoint solution architects, when you beef up yourself and go in, you now find out that, hey, they're not even doing much, So, but yeah, you just need that experience. You need to know how to develop, how to automate stuff, how to get your hands dirty with SharePoint. Like you need to do stuffs and all that, maybe using PowerShell and all those cool stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that's it basically, right? You need to do your own personal practice, keep playing with the tool, keep playing with the tool, know the subject, just know the subject, know how to defend whatever question that gets thrown at you on that subject. I think that's really it to be a solution architect, yeah. To be able to provide solution to, let's say, your head of department comes to you and like, hey, AY, I want to, we need the ability to be tracking any request that comes into IT, but we don't want to pay for Jira, we don't want to pay for IT service desks. Can you develop a SharePoint solution for that? Well, I actually did something like that for NIRA, Nigerian Internet Registration Agency. I did a project for them on that particular concept. Like we need to track requests, Can you do that with SharePoint? Yes, you can do that with SharePoint. It requires a whole lot of tweaking and reconfiguring, right? So just knowing the subject, basically. AY, does that answer your question? Okay, yeah. So I think where were we? Okay, general here. Wanted to add a search for apps, SharePoint. Okay, so I go to my list, attendance tracker, save, right? Right, so it gets added here, and I can see the sample stuff I just made, right? I think Daniel, you asked the question, right? So this way to do it.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so you can add this plus sign at the top here. You can add cool stuffs, right? You can add a whole lot of applications. So Microsoft has in their store, they have a wide range of applications that have been developed by other persons. Most of them are free, most of them are paid. You can add this poly, to ask, questions, quizzes on this particular team. You can add it, right? So you can just from that this plus sign, you can add anything to any channel. Almost there. You need organization access to blah 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 blah. Subs. Save. So you can add as much apps as you want to any channel you of your choice, right? So by just using that app stuff. Yeah, so that's it for that. Any other questions?
Guys, the floor is open. If you have a question, just raise your hands and I'll call you. Or you can drop it in the chat window, whichever works for you.
Michael.
All right. Ario.
Yeah, Ario.
You can have the floor, please. Ario, please go ahead and ask a question.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Okay. So my question is about SharePoint site members. In my office currently, I use a document repository in the office where I created libraries for each and every unit, and only members of each unit can access their library. I even did it like a menu with us drop downs and all of that. But after while on that, what I noticed was that I couldn't add. I created groups, SharePoint groups, and I put each member of a unit in that group. So you only be able to access the library that belongs to your unit. You see the menu of other units, but you'll not be able to access their libraries. But what I discovered that you can't even access your own library if you are not first a member of that site. Like you need to be added as a member of the site, and then before you can now access your own library. So I was expecting it, while I was doing it then, I was expecting it to be different. Like you could just, once you have access to that your security, your SharePoint group, you should be able to only access your own library. But then I discovered that you also have to first of all be a member of the site.
Of the site
like, you know,
itself,
the
yeah,
default
correct.
SharePoint groups, site members. Like you have to be a site member before you can access, be a member of the group I have created before you can access your own library. So is there a way to actually go around that? That you don't have somebody, you don't have to make somebody become a site member before they can access a library.
So there's no way to go around it, right? Although,
okay,
if you added someone as a member of a SharePoint location, right? I believe Chinedu, if I share the link to that person, the person should be able to access it. Am I correct, Chinedu? Are you still on the call? If I share a link to that particular site, right, to that particular library, you should be. I've not tried it out actually. Yeah, but ideally, you know, someone shouldn't have access to your bedroom if they don't have access to your house, right? So you need to have access to the house. Then when you come into the house, then you can now, you know,
because
that was
what I was actually expecting. But then,
yeah. So you need, so it's more like a trickle down, right? A site contains libraries, right? You need to get into the site somehow to have access to the libraries, right? Yeah, Chinedu, please.
okay.
Yeah, Stan. Thank
Yeah,
you.
help out.
So I always look at the permission levels for beginners. I'll just say first of all, I have the whole picture like a triangle sign, the hierarchy from the top to the bottom, where we say permissions flow, from the top to the bottom. So what we mean that, you start looking at it from the tenant level, right?
Yeah.
Then to the individual site level, down to the document library, to the folders and files, right? So that way, if you have that mentality of managing permission or access into SharePoint, you'll be able to troubleshoot better, because the permissions or access flows from the top to the bottom. You can't break that hierarchy except you're giving directly to that location, being that if I have to give access just to you to the document library, then you have access only to the specific document library that you have. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so Ario, what Chinedu is trying to explain is that, hey, this process you have within your organization is for them to see where to select, right? So they need to have access to the site to see. However, you can share directly that particular library with them, right? Because that comes into play for guest users, because guest users might not necessarily have access to the site, but maybe they just have access to a particular folder within that site. So yes, I can just share that site, that folder, then they will get an email with a link to access that particular folder, right? So, but for a clear organizational structure, we want things to be organized where you need to like come in, see if we have any news item or something that you need to see before you go into your conclave for your department. Yeah, you see that. So the person needs to have access to the site for them to see. Then they will now have access to the library that is just theirs, right? So yeah, that also works. Any other questions, guy? Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome, bro.
Any other question, guys? Okay, Stanley,
so
I want to ask one.
Okay, yeah,
So
sure.
for organization intranet sites, do they use communication site or for a team site to create an intranet site for the organization?
Yeah, so for intranet, like you guys want the place to like see stuff and all that, it's usually advised have a communication site, right? A communication site, because usually for communication site, everyone in the organization have access to that site, right? So that's where you can post news article, if there's a communique for the organization there, you post that. So it's advised a communication site serves that particular purpose.
Awesome.
Okay,
I can't
guys.
react on my teams, but I'm giving a thumbs up.
It's okay. Okay. Cool stuff. So, in the absence of any question, right? I'm very approachable on social media, LinkedIn, right? You reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you happen to have my contact, fine. On WhatsApp, I have call anxiety. I get anxiety if someone calls me on the phone, right? Just send me a text, send me a chat. I usually respond faster. right? You can reach out to me on LinkedIn for any assistance at all, any insights at all. Reach out to me on it. Let's connect. Let's share ideas. Like I mentioned, I'm a lifelong learner. I learn. I am not an expert in anything, right? I just keep learning and keep knowing stuff, and it helps me one way or the other. So thank you guys for showing up. I really appreciate. When you have a session and no one attends, it's demoralizing. But hey, I have up to 20 persons or more. Thank you very much
Sorry,
for.
I wanted to ask this question. Sorry, please.
Okay, yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, who's speaking?
Hi, Christy. Go ahead.
Christy, okay.
Yeah. Okay, please, I wanted to ask this question. I'm Christy from Jos.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I came late. I'm sorry because I wanted to know that I have a license 3 Office 365.
Okay.
Is it automatic that I get the SharePoint there, or I have to get another license?
It depends, right? It depends on what license you have. Let me show you. My screen is still being shared, right? So let's
Yeah.
go to products and billings.
I have a family license for 365.
Okay, you have a family license. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. If you have a family license and you have access to OneDrive, so that means there should be a SharePoint somewhere. Chinedu, am I correct? Oh
But
no,
the Microsoft 365 family, they don't. It doesn't have
it doesn't,
SharePoint.
right?
It
It
doesn't have
doesn't have
SharePoint. Just
SharePoint. Oh,
OneDrive.
okay. Okay, just OneDrive. So yes, so for the product you have currently, a family plan, it doesn't come with SharePoint because because ideally for a family you don't need SharePoint, right? Just have OneDrive where you guys, and if you want to do SharePoint, you come to your sitting room and you guys have a conversation. That's SharePoint. So it's basically for, don't mind me, that was a joke. So it's
Okay,
basically for
but
business
we're
plan.
using that one for the office. We're using the family for okay, but we're using that for the office work. We just decided to do it for our
Um,
office, and we went for the family plan.
Okay.
okay.
Stanley, let me come in here. So,
Okay,
Christy,
yeah,
the
yeah,
family
help.
But from all that I learned, from all that I learned from you today, SharePoint is our business plan and all those things, and we
Yeah,
really need it.
yeah.
So we need to get a separate license for that.
Yes, yeah, yes, please. Emmanuel, you can
yes.
assist here.
Okay, so Christy, so the Microsoft 365 family plan was actually majorly designed for 6 people in a family, as the name implies, just for you to be able to download, install the Office application so you can have it locally. So the only Microsoft 365 service
Yeah.
that is attached to that is just
Okay.
OneDrive. You don't even have Microsoft Teams with it, you don't have SharePoint with it, you don't have the Exchange Online with it. So it's just for the Office application to be able to download and have the Office application locally on your machine. But if you're going to be using other services like the
Yeah.
SharePoints, the Teams, for example, now you need a business plan. And the list you can use for the business plan is either use a standalone plan. If you feel the
Okay.
only thing you need is a SharePoint online, so you can just go for the SharePoint standalone, maybe SharePoint plan one or plan two. But if you're looking at having more things like having Teams as a service, then you can go for Microsoft 365 Business Basic. So it gives you access to the Exchange online, the SharePoint, and the Teams, and OneDrive as well. So
Okay,
that's
so
it.
Okay.
Christy,
Okay.
You can
I'm
also
on that page.
you can contact Emmanuel. I think he does consultancy around that to get you started. So he can assist you with setting up and all those migration stuff that would
Yeah,
take
because
place. Yeah.
that's the, if I knew that one before, maybe I wouldn't have gone. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
If I
Yeah.
knew it before, I wouldn't have gone for the family plan, probably.
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay.
Emmanuel, I'll
You can
contact
still
you.
do you can, if you want to. Hi, Christy, this is Olajumoke. Thank you for joining. I know we met in Jos. I'm sure that's why. Thank you so much. I'm glad to see you. So as he said, you can meet Emmanuel and also
Yeah, sure.
and I'm sure you can also, if you get to your next anniversary, if you're considering, you can actually get the basic license, even if you don't want to go to
Yeah.
the standard. That also comes bundled with SharePoint, and that can serve the purpose. However, if you feel you want to start, maybe you want to get your hands dirty before that time, you can actually do the developers program. You can sign up for the developers program with this one that Stanley is actually showing us, and you can get started with that just to get around the SharePoint features. You know, you
Okay.
can do that. I appreciate your joining. Thank you.
Thank you
Hello, good
so much. It has been a while that I heard from you. Thank you.
Yeah.
hello, good evening. I wanted to ask Mr. Emmanuel, how can we contact you? Are you on the group, the WhatsApp group, or
Yes,
can we
I'm on the
send you?
WhatsApp group. I'm on the
Because
WhatsApp group.
I
Yeah,
was
I think
scrolling through, but I didn't see your name on as is are you the
He
invariant
he's
yes,
or
in
I'm the
various, yeah.
Inveriors. Yes, I'm the Inveriors. I just said I now on the WhatsApp group, so
okay,
that's my
okay.
number. Yeah.
Because invarious had a female profile picture, so
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I was confused. All
No
right, thank you
worries.
so much.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Okay, thanks, guys. Emmanuel, I'm signing out. Thanks very much for the
Okay,
opportunity.
Thank you,
before you
Stanley.
go,
Thank you so
Stanley,
much.
so we used to have an alternate interactive section. So I don't know if you'll be
Oh,
around
okay.
next week again. So it's going to be an interactive section. Other things that you feel you still want to cover, like the SharePoint permissions, you still have the opportunity and people have questions. So if you're going to be available, we'll be glad to have you next week as well.
Next week, Saturday. One sec. Let me just check my calendar. That should be on the second, third. Okay, yeah, no worries. I can make out time. I will make out time.
Thank you.
I'll
Thank
make
you.
out time. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for joining today's session. We really appreciate you for joining. Next week we'll continue with other things in SharePoint, like the SharePoint permission, time stores, and the likes. So we'd like to have you on board. Thank you so much, and have a lovely weekend.
Thanks, guys. Good session. Thanks, Stanley. Bye,
Thanks, guys. Thank
everybody.
you all.